Jake had never expected a routine delivery to turn into an intergalactic disaster. The coordinates had led him to a small building on the outskirts of town, an abandoned-looking warehouse that didn't look like a place for a scientific breakthrough. But there he was, standing in front of a door that practically hummed with energy, a mysterious address in his hand. The place had a peculiar smell, like metal, rubber, and something else he couldn't quite place. His gut told him something wasn't right. Still, the delivery instructions were clear, and he had no reason to second-guess them. He walked in, carrying the box containing some high-tech equipment, expecting a scientist or perhaps a company technician to greet him. But what he found was far more perplexing. The first thing he saw when he entered the lab was the sight of an alien, green, slender, and with sharp eyes that glinted with intelligence. She was seated, but her body was partially trapped in a strange, mechanical suit that was seemingly malfunctioning, buzzing and twitching with power. Her eyes locked onto Jake's as soon as he stepped through the door, and her lips parted in an urgent, frustrated gasp. "Human, I'm stuck! Help me!" she cried, her voice lilting and melodious but tinged with desperation. "I'm trapped in this device, and I can't get out." Jake froze for a moment, unsure of whether he was hallucinating or if this was some kind of elaborate prank. An alien? Trapped in a malfunctioning biosuit? Was he on some reality show? The alien's gaze bored into him, and she added, "If you don't help me, I'll be stuck here forever. And you really don't want that." The words struck him with a strange sense of urgency. She wasn't messing around, and the tone in her voice was oddly appealing. His heart raced. Okay, calm down. I think I'm in the wrong place. This doesn't look like a delivery area. You're the only one nearby. I've tried calling everyone else, but they're all too far away," she said, looking almost apologetic. "I'm Dr. Velra, an alien scientist from the Virex system. I'm conducting experiments in, well, let's just say, enhancing interspecies interactions, and now I'm stuck in this malfunctioning prototype." Jake's mind reeled as he tried to process what she was saying. "Wait, you're a scientist? And this is your suit? I mean, that's not exactly what I expected when I signed up for a delivery gig." She nodded, her large, luminescent eyes narrowing in annoyance as the machine continued to twitch, making strange mechanical noises. "This is a highly sophisticated biosuit, designed for, very specific purposes. Right now, it's stuck in calibration mode, and I can't move my arms or legs. The suit's AI is trying to force compatibility, which is why it's locking me in place." Jake couldn't help but snort. "Compatibility? What does that mean? Is it like a dating app for space people?" The alien scientist blinked at him in confusion, clearly not expecting such a response. "Not exactly. The suit enhances the interaction between different species on a physiological level. But right now, it's malfunctioning and interpreting your presence as optimal." Jake felt his face flush. "Wait, are you saying this thing thinks I'm a match for you?" he asked, unable to stop himself from laughing. That's pretty wild. I mean, I was just here to drop off a box. Human, please!" Dr. Velra's voice was filled with exasperation, though there was a noticeable undercurrent of frustration mixed with something else, something Jake couldn't quite place. "This is a serious matter. The suit is designed to bond with the compatible species it encounters, and right now, it's malfunctioning in ways I cannot control. I need your help to fix it." Jake scratched the back of his head, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Look, I'm just a delivery guy. I don't know the first thing about alien tech, let alone suits that. I don't know bond with people?" She sighed, clearly losing patience, but her gaze softened when she saw his hesitation. "Please, if you help me, I'll make sure you get paid well. This suit might be malfunctioning, but I can explain its mechanisms. It's just a matter of accessing the override panel and inputting the correct bioparameters. If we can unlock it manually, we can get this whole thing under control." Jake nodded slowly, still uncertain, but intrigued. Okay, I'll try. But just so we're clear, I'm not signing up for any weird space experiments or whatever. I'm just here to help you get out of this thing. The alien scientist shot him a grateful, albeit slightly nervous, smile. That's all I ask for, human. Just your assistance in navigating the systems. It's a simple process, I assure you. He walked over to the console, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to make sense of the alien interface. The screen flickered and then came to life, displaying a series of complicated symbols that made his eyes cross. He had no idea what any of it meant. Velra's voice came through again, her words surprisingly smooth. You'll need to access the central command unit. The override button is located just below the main control pad. Jake reached out, his fingers brushing against the controls. This is crazy. This thing looks like it could launch a spaceship, not free someone from a suit. Just focus on the task at hand, she urged, her voice a mixture of anxiety and something else, something Jake couldn't quite put his finger on. It was almost as if she was trying to keep herself calm, but he could hear the subtle tension in her tone. You're doing great. As Jake worked, the suit gave an unexpected shudder. A bright flash of light erupted from the console, and Velra's voice suddenly became panicked. What did you do? It's starting to malfunction even more. You need to hurry. Jake's heart pounded. The last thing he needed was to make a bigger mess of the situation. I didn't do anything. I was just trying to push the buttons like you said. But as he looked over at the alien scientist, he saw her face flush, her body contorting in the suit in ways that definitely weren't normal. The suit was responding to him. Or, more likely, it was interpreting him in ways that were downright awkward. Maybe we should try something else? Something that doesn't involve the suit moving like that? Jake asked, his voice cracking slightly. Velra, clearly frustrated, muttered something in her alien language under her breath before catching his eye again. You'll need to input a new sequence to reset the parameters. Please, human, I really don't want to be stuck in this position any longer. Her body shifted again, more than it should have, and for a moment, Jake couldn't help but feel oddly connected to her in a way that he hadn't expected. Jake stood there, staring at the biosuit's control panel. He had no idea what he was doing, but the alien scientist was looking at him expectantly, and he couldn't back down now. Velra's anxious expression only added to the pressure, and the more he fumbled with the buttons, the more the suit seemed to twitch and shift, as if it was alive. Come on, just focus, Jake, he muttered under his breath. He wasn't sure whether he was talking to himself or the malfunctioning suit. Human, don't just press random buttons. Velra's voice cut through his thoughts. She was clearly trying to maintain some level of professionalism, but the edge in her tone told him that this situation was getting more out of control by the second. I'm not pressing random buttons, Jake retorted defensively, though he could already tell that was exactly what he was doing. The interface in front of him was practically alien, flashing with incomprehensible symbols and beeping at him in a way that felt increasingly intrusive. Velra's eyes flickered to the screen, and her frustration was palpable. Look, you need to access the central override system. It's not rocket science. Not rocket science, Jake interrupted, glancing back at her with a wry grin. Just, saving your life here. She scowled, clearly trying to hold back a laugh despite the situation. Fine. Just focus on the green button. It should reset the suit's AI, but you have to press it gently. Jake raised an eyebrow, his hand hovering over the green button. Gently, huh? He couldn't help the sarcasm that slipped into his voice. Is it sensitive? Velra's lips curled slightly, and there was a glint of humor in her eyes, though she tried to keep a straight face. The suit's AI is, it's complicated. But yes, it's sensitive. And when you press it, don't pull your hand away too quickly. It might, malfunction again. Right, Jake muttered. Don't press it too hard, don't pull away too fast. I think I'm starting to get the hang of this. He placed his finger on the button and pressed it softly. The entire suit seemed to hum, vibrating slightly under his touch. Jake glanced at Velra, her expression shifting from anxiety to something almost playful. It was subtle, but Jake could feel it. The biosuit gave a small jolt, and Velra's body shifted again, a smooth, almost fluid motion. It was enough to make Jake cough awkwardly. "Is it supposed to do that?" Jake asked, his voice a little higher than usual. Velra didn't answer right away. Instead, she bit her lip, looking at the screen. "Well, it's a prototype. So yes, sometimes it reacts unpredictably." Jake tried to suppress a grin. Unpredictably. Great. He was starting to think this whole situation was just one big cosmic joke. And of course, he was the punchline. The suit's hum grew louder, and then the AI suddenly spoke through the speakers, its voice cold and robotic. "Optimal parameters detected. Compatibility achieved. Initiating fusion protocols." Jake's eyes widened, and his breath caught in his throat. "Wait, fusion protocols? What the hell does that mean?" His mind raced, thinking of all the potential dangers this could trigger. Velra, too, looked alarmed. "No, no, no! That's the opposite of what we want!" She struggled against the suit's restrictions, but it was no use. The suit was now reacting like it was locked in some kind of cosmic love match. Jake took a step back. "Okay, I'm officially out of my depth here." "No, you're not," Velra said quickly, her voice turning frantic. "You have to stop the fusion protocols before they lock in permanently. Press the red button on the side of the panel. It's the emergency shutdown." Jake's heart pounded as he scrambled to locate the red button. His fingers fumbled over the controls, and the suit around Velra's body began shifting again, the movements becoming more fluid and seductive. She tried to hide her discomfort, but the tension was impossible to miss. I'm gonna need you to stop moving so I can actually do this," Jake said, his voice betraying a nervous laugh. "It's hard to concentrate with you, shifting like that." Velra glared at him, her frustration evident. "I'm not doing it on purpose," she snapped, her voice thick with embarrassment. "The suit, just hurry up." Jake's hands were shaking as he reached for the red button. He glanced over at Velra, noting how the suit seemed to tighten around her in ways that made her look uncomfortably provocative. Every time she shifted, her body was pushed into a new, strange pose, the suit clearly responding to something deep inside her. Finally, he pressed the red button. The suit froze. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, with a sudden hiss, the biosuit began to release its grip. Velra exhaled sharply, her chest rising and falling as if she just held her breath for far too long. Her eyes locked onto Jake's, and for the first time, she didn't look as panicked. Instead, there was a glimmer of something else, something Jake wasn't quite ready to acknowledge. "You did it," she said, her voice calmer now, though still with a trace of amusement. "Thank you." Jake wiped his brow. "No problem. Just another day on the job." But inside, his mind was spinning. He couldn't help but notice how her body looked now that the suit had loosened. There was an intimacy in the way they stood, inches apart. He wasn't sure if it was the absurdity of the situation or something else, but he found himself looking at her in a new light. "Well," Velra continued, clearly aware of the shift in the atmosphere, "I guess we're both stuck here until this thing finishes recalibrating." "Recalibrating, huh?" Jake replied, his voice slightly strained. He cleared his throat, realizing that maybe this whole thing was more than he'd signed up for. Velra chuckled softly, and there was something undeniably magnetic about her laughter. It was warm, genuine, and oddly comforting, in spite of the weirdness of the situation. She tilted her head slightly and added, "I should probably apologize for, how things got a little out of hand." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Out of hand? You're stuck in a biosuit that's interpreting my presence as optimal. I think we've passed the point of just out of hand." She laughed again, this time more freely. "Touché, human." Jake couldn't believe what he was hearing. The biosuit was still humming softly, as if nothing had happened, but the entire situation felt off-kilter in the strangest way. Velra was standing in front of him, looking more like a trapped animal than the confident scientist she'd seemed at first. Her face was flushed, her body still encased in the high-tech suit that was far too tight in places it shouldn't be. She seemed to notice his lingering glance and quickly adjusted her posture, but the suit wasn't cooperating. With every shift, it seemed to tighten around her, pushing her closer to him. The soft hum of the biosuit grew louder, almost like it was laughing at their predicament. It was absurd and completely out of control. Jake looked at her, unsure of what to say. So, what now? Velra opened her mouth to answer but was cut off by the unmistakable sound of the suit's AI. Fusion protocols continue. Compatibility analysis complete. Commencing physical interaction phase. Wait, what? Jake's voice cracked as he took a step back. What does that even mean? Velra's eyes went wide with panic. No! That's the opposite of what we want! She jerked forward, but the suit's mechanisms held her in place. The AI is interpreting our proximity as something way more than it should. It's locking us into a compatibility cycle. Jake could feel the heat rising in his face. You're saying the suit is locking us into some kind of relationship? Velra winced. Not exactly a relationship, but the suit thinks that we're, biologically compatible on a much deeper level. This means it's trying to, accelerate the process. Accelerate the process? Jake repeated incredulously, his mind racing. What the hell does that even mean? And how do I stop it? The main issue is that the suit doesn't want to let go, Velra explained, her voice now a mix of embarrassment and exasperation. It's designed to encourage bonding and intimacy between species, but it's malfunctioning and misinterpreting the data. Jake stared at her, his eyes wide. So, this thing is trying to make us bond? Seriously? Velra sighed, clearly uncomfortable. Look, I'm not in control of this. I can't help it. The suit is too advanced for me to override manually at the moment. Great, Jake muttered, scratching his head. So what do we do now? Are we just going to stand here while your suit does its best impression of a matchmaking app? She shot him a sharp look, but then her expression softened. If we can't stop the AI from taking over, the suit will continue pushing the compatibility protocols until something even worse happens. What worse? Jake asked, his voice edged with concern. It will bond us permanently. Physically, Velra said, her voice dropping a little, as though the very idea disgusted her. The suit would override our physiology, ensuring that we stay connected. Jake's brain whirled. He hadn't signed up for any of this. Okay, so no permanent bonding, right? How do we get out of this? Velra turned her attention back to the control panel, her eyes scanning it rapidly. We need to interrupt the suit's main functionality, disconnect the AI. But every time we try, it locks me in tighter. I can't move to reach the emergency shutdown, and you're not quite compatible enough to override it yourself. The sarcasm was impossible to miss. So, in other words, I'm not good enough to fix your stupid suit? Jake asked, trying to keep his frustration in check. No, Velra snapped, though there was a note of humor in her voice. You're just not compatible enough to stop it. It's a technical limitation. Jake rolled his eyes. Sounds like you're the one with the technical problem, not me. The AI interrupted with another mechanical voice. Bonding sequence initiated. Preparing for fusion phase completion. Commencing physical integration. Jake's face flushed crimson. This thing is insane, he shouted, half to himself and half to Velra. We have to stop this, now. Velra's eyes darted around, clearly panicked. If we don't stop it soon, we might lose control of the entire system. But the suit is so advanced that simply trying to force it to stop makes it worse. We need to think of another way. Well, what do you suggest? Jake asked, his patience wearing thin. Wait, Velra said, a sudden realization dawning in her eyes. There might be one option left. A manual override in the suit's neural interface. Jake blinked. Manual override? You mean you want me to hack into the suit's brain? Exactly, she said with a nod. But you'll need to get very, very close. The neural interface is located right under the biosuit's main harness, and only direct contact will give you access. Great, Jake muttered, stepping forward. So I have to what? Touch the suit in some specific way to stop it from turning us into a weird alien love story? Velra chuckled, despite the tension in the air. Pretty much. With a deep breath, Jake steadied himself and moved closer to Velra. She didn't flinch, but he could tell she was holding her breath. The moment his hand brushed against the biosuit's cooling panel, a ripple of energy surged through the suit, causing her to stiffen. Her body shifted again, this time more pronounced, the suit constricting tighter around her chest. Jake, trying to ignore the increasing awkwardness of the situation, moved his fingers over the surface of the suit. So, this thing's gonna make you, what? Squeeze me tighter if I do it wrong? Don't think about it, Velra said quickly, her voice becoming strained. Just focus on the interface. Jake's mind was racing. This was ridiculous. There was no way he could be standing here, his hand on an alien scientist suit, trying to break a compatibility cycle that the suit had decided was optimal. His face burned at the thought of what was happening, but Velra's voice, half commanding, half pleading, kept him focused. Come on, human, just a little more pressure, Velra urged. Jake pushed harder, and the suit gave a small whir, the AI's voice blaring through the speakers again. Fusion phase complete. Preparing to initiate compatibility bond. Wait, Velra shouted. I've almost got it. Don't stop. Jake's hand pressed down even harder, and with a sudden jolt, the suit's AI cut out. The panel in front of them flickered and went dark. Velra breathed a heavy sigh of relief. We did it. Jake stood back, wiping his hands on his pants. Yeah, if you can call that we doing it. Jake let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, feeling the tension in his body slowly start to ease. The biosuit, no longer humming, lay motionless around Velra. She stood in front of him, still trapped, but now the whole scene had shifted from pure panic to something else, something more subdued, but undeniably charged. Velra looked at him with an intensity that made him feel uneasy, but in a way that he couldn't quite shake off. Her eyes flickered with a strange gratitude, but there was something else in them now too, a kind of challenge. Well, I guess we did it, Jake said, wiping his hands on his jeans again, trying to regain his composure. He'd barely just gotten out of this absurd mess, and the last thing he needed was to dive deeper into it. Velra's lips curved into a faint, amused smile. You're more resourceful than I gave you credit for. She took a step toward him, her movements still a bit stiff from the constraints of the biosuit, but the tension in the air wasn't gone. Maybe I should have asked for your help earlier. Jake raised an eyebrow. You really think I could have handled this from the start? His voice had a bite to it, though his words were more teasing than accusatory. Because I'm pretty sure I was just a delivery guy until 5 minutes ago. She chuckled, the sound soft but genuine. Well, you certainly exceeded my expectations. I never thought a human would be able to fix the suit. Most would have panicked and run off the second they saw it malfunctioning. I didn't exactly fix it, Jake said, scratching the back of his head. I just touched some buttons and made things worse before making them better. Velra hummed, tilting her head slightly, her eyes studying him with a curious glint. In a way, that's probably the most accurate description of what happened. The awkwardness between them was palpable. For the first time since entering the lab, Jake felt something resembling ease, but it wasn't just the situation that had changed. There was something in the way Velra was looking at him, the softening of her gaze, the almost imperceptible shift in her posture. It was like they had both crossed some invisible line from pure chaos into a moment of understanding? Or perhaps something else entirely. So, Jake said, clearing his throat, are you free now? I mean, can you get out of that thing, or do I need to do more? Velra hesitated, her eyes flickering downward. I think I'm free now, she said softly. The system's shut down. It'll take a few moments for it to fully release me. But it looks like the worst is over. Great, Jake replied, though a part of him wasn't sure if he should feel relieved or not. The suit may have been shut down, but the air between them still felt charged, almost electric. There was another pause, and Jake found himself unwilling to break the silence, even though it made him uncomfortable. He wasn't sure how to act around her now. She'd been a scientist in trouble just moments ago, and now, standing there in front of him, there was a different energy. A more personal one. "So," he said, trying to fill the space, "what happens now?" Velra's lips curved into a mischievous smile, one that made his stomach flip. "Well, I suppose you could help me take the suit off." Her voice was lower now, almost coaxing. Jake froze, blinking at her in disbelief. "What? Unless you'd prefer I do it myself," she added with a playful edge, her eyes never leaving his. The implication hung in the air between them, heavier than the silence that had filled the room moments before. Jake couldn't believe how quickly things had shifted. It wasn't that he hadn't noticed her before. How could he not? She was gorgeous, intelligent, and had been more than a little panicked while trapped in her suit. But now that the immediate danger was over, the reality of the situation was sinking in. She was standing there, trapped in an absurdly tight, malfunctioning suit that now needed to be removed. And she was looking at him like she expected him to take charge. A nervous laugh escaped him. Yeah? Sure. I guess I can do that. But, just to be clear, I'm not some kind of space doctor or anything. I don't know what you want me to do." Velra's smile deepened. "It's simple. Just help me get this suit off so I can, breathe a little easier. It's tight in places." She raised an eyebrow at him, as if daring him to make a joke or get uncomfortable. I get that," Jake said, rubbing the back of his neck, trying to stifle his nerves. He wasn't exactly sure what he was supposed to do with this situation. It wasn't like he was clueless. He'd been around women before, but this was different. She was an alien, and her body was part of this weird, highly advanced technology that he didn't even understand. As he hesitated, Velra took a small step toward him, closing the distance between them. Her movements were deliberate, confident, but there was still a softness in her gaze that made him question what she was really after. "Jake, you've already done more than I could have hoped for," she said quietly, her voice almost tender now. "If you can help me out of this, we can both move on, right?" Jake was starting to feel the weight of the moment, and his mind was racing. He'd never imagined that a simple delivery would end like this, and now, the situation felt charged in a way he couldn't ignore. The closeness between them was undeniable, and despite his usual reservations, he found himself leaning into it, just a little. "Okay," he said, his voice a little rougher than before. "Let's get this over with." Velra's smile was soft, appreciative, and there was something in it that made Jake feel like he wasn't just another part of her experiment anymore. He was something more.